Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa's 10th State of the Nation address was a landmark moment for the government of national unity. Marking a shift from crisis management to consolidation, the speech was a carefully calibrated balancing act designed to reassure investors, but also addressing a public increasingly frustrated by service delivery failures. Now, while the president hailed a turning point for the economy, the address was met with a mix of praise for its pragmatism, as well as a sharp criticism for its perceived lack of urgency on the ground. Let's get some perspective. Political analyst Professor Dirk Kotzé joins us for this conversation. Prof, I haven't heard too many people actually crying too foul as they have in previous years. And I'm not saying there isn't criticism, but certainly feels as though he didn't miss too much when it comes to what was said, or perhaps it was just very diplomatic and pragmatic. What are your thoughts?
Good afternoon. Yes, I think this is one of the examples of President Ramaphosa when he is really a diplomat and negotiator and a leader of a coalition government. He tried to accommodate most of the different components of the interest that he identified as important. And I think for some people that means that he didn't sort of prioritize so much. It is more that he tried to be inclusive as possible. Interesting, what he didn't say is that that the detail will be in what appears in the budget a bit later on, when the Minister of Finance will announce that. So he might announce a number of things, but no detail indicate. Normally, this speech is criticized, the SONA address, for its lack of detail. And this time there wasn't much detail, but for some reason, President Ramaphosa was not really criticized for that. I think why this is different is the fact that he almost immediately started with some of the main issues. You've discussed one now earlier on, and that is about crime. And the fact that it appears as if he wants to confront it much more directly than in the second one is the big issue for places like Johannesburg, and that's water issues. The fact that he said, well, I'm going to take the lead in it by chairing the National Water Crisis Committee, I think that is something which the people also welcome. And then also with respect to the agricultural situation, the foot and mouth disease, he did exactly the same. So it looks as if he was a little bit more assertive than maybe in some of these previous SONA addresses.
Yeah, that's very interesting to say, actually, because if you dig into the details of all of those announcements, there aren't specific timelines. President takes over that National Water Crisis Committee. Then means we were speaking about the failings of the deputy president in that regard, if that happens to be the case, but also the failings of the Water and Sanitation Department itself. Does the fact that we have a GNU have anything to do with it, where you're finding perhaps a more tempered display from across the aisle?
Yes, I think so. And I think the fact that many of the ministers have been sort of embedded in this speech, whether it's the Minister of Agriculture, John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Home Affairs, Leon Schreiber, or some of the other ministers, the Minister of Public Works, McPherson, they all play a role or receive attention in this speech. And I think this made them feeling much more sort of part of the speech and not seen as opposition. That in the past, very often they played that role. So in that sense, I would say President Ramaphosa was successful in not creating a sense of we versus them, but rather that it is presented as a unified government of national unity. At one point, they actually made a little bit of a joke of it. Of referring to the government of national unity, and then of saying, well, this is actually working, despite maybe the predictions that it will have problems. So, and that he also referred to it as, you might love this the fact of the government of national unity. So it gives one a sort of a subtext, an understanding of where he stands, and that he sees it not as a challenge to him as the president or as a challenge to the ANC.
Okay, then let me ask this. It's not necessarily meant to be part of this interview, but it's just something that you've made me think of now. Does this possibly mean, and I mean, it's still a long way until the next election, of course, 2029, that is, the national election, that is. But does this mean that the ANC, in some ways, has actually brought in these other parties so much that if another party was to ever get a majority or even a higher stake than the ANC, and maybe not an overall majority, but that it would be a lot easier to then rein the ANC in or bring the ANC in as well and still create this GNU if that was the case? Do you think that that's what this has created now, a perennial state of GNU almost?
GNU is not necessarily going to be as it is now, as a 10-party grouping. It might be smaller in future, but it will certainly have this larger than simply 50% plus one type of coalitions. And I think it does lay the basis for a broader and a more inclusive future, especially because we don't know what the patterns will be of support for the DA as well as the ANC and maybe some of the other parties also. And for that reason, I think President Ramaphosa is at least saying, for the moment, for the foreseeable future, it appears as if it is working. They've gone in the first year and a half through difficult moments, the difficult issues, whether it's the Bella Act or the National Health Insurance or international relations. And it appears as if they have some form of understanding of each other at the moment. It's not such an issue, the burning issues all the time. And that can stabilize the politics because ultimately it will work for the parties that are in the dominant positions.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the two big elements that I suppose everybody walks away with. It's immediately the first things you probably think about when you think of SONA yesterday. It is the deployment of the SANDF to Gauteng as well as the Western Cape on illegal mining, as well as gang violence, and it's that National Water Crisis Committee. Are those going to be hits or misses, do you feel? I mean, do they resonate with the overall messaging that at least they're taking this seriously?
I think there are two components to it. First of all, the fact that they are clearly priorities. And I think for the public, that is important. That will speak to the public to say the government understands our issues, our situation. So from that point of view, I think it is something which will be acceptable. There will be some sense of, the government does listen to us. But then whether it is going to make the impact that is expected, that's something different. The Defence Force has been in the Western Cape before, not so long ago, actually, just a few years ago. And they were after a while withdrawn. It did not make so much of a difference then. So I think what is now should be, they should have a different approach. As I understand it, it's not going to be much more intelligence-driven than in the past. That's my impression. And it is also that it's supposed to be the strategy that they will have to follow will have to be different from what they've done in the past. Yeah. With respect to water, I think that's slightly different. I think by implication, don't have the capacity, even if they receive all the payments that's necessary to be able to deal with the water situation. It is simply beyond them, the scope of it. And that the provinces were actually supposed to become involved already before the SONA addressed. They didn't so much. So now it becomes a national priority. President Ramaphosa announced last night that there will be an allocation of 54 billion for this specific purpose. Now, the money is one component of it. The other component is simply to do the work. I live in Tshwane and we have similar problems, not as extreme as in Johannesburg, maybe, but it is very difficult to renew the infrastructure and not cause major disruptions for businesses and for residents and so on. So it's going to be a give and take, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, look, Professor Dirk Kotzé, we haven't even spoken about load shedding. I mean, it just feels like perhaps we're leading a little bit too much here. Load shedding is over. They've even promised 40% renewable energy by 2030. I mean, it just seems like a very lofty goal, one might say. especially given Eskom's fragility at this time and the slow pace of renewable rollout. I've got 30 seconds. Do you think it's too soon to be calling out for renewable energy at 40% for the country?
No, I don't think it's too soon. This has become a revolution in South Africa. You know, it's all over the place. It is from individual as well as what you see on a big scale when solar farms and so on. So there's a massive initiative taking place in South Africa. And I don't think this is something which is too ambitious.
Yeah.
I think what is important is that the Gwede Mantashe mandate about coal, maybe this is the end of it.
Ooh, wow. That's going to be tempestuous as well. Something really, a big fight could actually come off of because of that conversation. Professor Dirk Kotzé, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining us this